We are now live.
Thank you, Emma. So, welcome everybody to this special City Council meeting. Just by way of explanation, there is one item on today's agenda that has to do with Bill 229, Schedule 6 to that as it affects conservation authorities. The reason why I called this meeting at the request of Councillor Carpenter is because the way that I think third reading is coming up very quickly. So if we're going to have any kind of meaningful comment on the bill, it should take place this week, which of course we can only do if we're meeting as a council. So that's the explanation. So we'll move on now. Madam Clerk, if you please call the roll.
Certainly, starting with Ward 1, please, Councillor Weaver.
Councillor Weaver.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, my volume is not working on my earpiece.
Can confirm that Councillor Weaver is present, so we'll go to Councillor Vanderstelt next.
Present.
Thank you, Councillor Sless.
Present.
Councillor McCreary.
Here.
Councillor Martin.
Here.
Councillor Carpenter.
Here.
Councillor Antosky.
Here.
Councillor Wall.
Present.
And Mayor Davis.
Present. So of course I'll have to read, as we always do, the rules of procedure. You've heard it all 100 times before, but I got to read them. So all members will remain muted during the meeting to reduce feedback. All web cameras shall remain turned on so that you count the quorum. If we lose quorum, we will recess for up to 15 minutes. And if we can't regain quorum and connection, then of course we'll adjourn. Staff are requested to join the meeting as the need arises, to answer questions from members of council or to make presentations. Any member of council should indicate they wish to speak by pressing the raised hand button in the participant list screen, bottom right-hand corner. Staff will lower your hand when you finish speaking. All members participating via this online video conference must vote using the eScribe connection. And of course, members of the public who registered as delegates can speak to us through Zoom, or they can do it through audio telephone connection. For this particular course, otherwise the rules for delegations applies. So does anybody have a declaration of pecuniary interest they need to make? Physically raise your hand. Seeing no raised hands, there are no delegations or presentations on today's agenda, and we just have one resolution before us today, which if passed, we then will bylaw. So, Councillor Carpenter, I understand you have a motion you'd like to place on the floor. Could you please read it and sound off your seconder?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My seconder is my ward mate, Councillor Cheryl Antosky, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Antosky. Whereas on November 5th, 2020, the Government of Ontario introduced Bill 229, Protect, Support, and Recover from COVID-19 Act. It's a budget measures bill. 2020, an omnibus bill that proposes limitations on conservation authorities permitting, planning, and enforcement powers. And whereas these changes will hinder conservation authorities' abilities to fulfill their mandate, do not reflect the provincial flood advisory and auditor general recommendations and recently updated provincial policy statement land use policies, and are problematic for the partner municipalities that they serve who rely on conservation authorities to help regulate development and illegal activities. And whereas the Corporation City of Brantford and the Grand River Conservation Authority have a memorandum of understanding for plan review services, last updated in July 24th, 2017, wherein the GRCA is responsible to provide technical comments to the city as outlined in the provincial policy statement and the official plan. And whereas the Corporation of the City of Brantford relies on the GRCA for plan review and technical services relating to Planning Act applications and pre-consultation meetings at no cost to the city for matters related to significant wildlife habitat, threatened and endangered species, areas of natural and scientific interest, environmental sensitive areas, and significant woodlots, significant valley lands, natural heritage systems, water and wetlands, fish habitat, flooding hazards, steep slopes and erosion hazards, stormwater management and hazard sites. And whereas if the legislation is amended as proposed by the province of Ontario, the Corporation of the City of Brantford will not be able to draw upon the expertise from the GRCA on planning matters, including matters before the local planning appeal tribunal, LPAT, and the city will be required to either hire staff with the necessary technical expertise or seek out consultants at a cost to the city or the development industry, resulting in delays in the processing of applications. Now, therefore, be resolved that the Corporation City of Brantford requests that the Government of Ontario remove the proposed amendments to the Conservation Authority Act and Planning Act in Bill 229 relating to planning and permitting and enforcement, and include strengthened provisions related to enforcement in order to support a balanced approach to development, enabled conservation authorities to mitigate natural hazards and protect natural heritage, and to prevent any downloading of permitting and enforcement costs to municipalities. And that this resolution be forwarded to the Premier, the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, the Minister of Natural Resources and Forestry, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, the Minister of Finance, the Honorable Will Boma MPP for Brantford Brant, and the Grand River Conservation Authority and the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. Speaking further to it, if I may.
Please go ahead, Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you. The regulation also puts in place the fact that only those that can be on the Grand River Conservation Authority are elected officials of members of council. Now, we had Vic Prendergast on the board for many years doing a great job for us, but as council, it's taking away a choice of council to decide who sits on that board. Secondly, it's making the councillors responsible to the municipality as opposed to being firstly responsible to the GRC, Grand River Conservation Authority. So, for example, a developer wanted to build a development in the city of Brantford and needed a stormwater management pond on hazard lands. We would have to speak on behalf of that developer if we was deemed good for Brantford, but it may not be good for the hazard lands or for the development of those lands or the floodplains. So what this is doing is it's really dismantling GRCs, the GRC as we know it in this bill. I think the province maybe has some ideas about how they can strengthen the conservation authorities, and there are some conservation authorities, I'm sure, in the province that are weak and have some difficulties, but the GRCA is not one of those. You know, as a member of the GRCA and serving as your representative for the last 2 years, going into the second year, and the mayor as well on that committee, we are concerned what this legislation will do to protection of the lands in the floodplains. We haven't had a flood in this community since GRCA was mandated to put together to deal with the lands along the Grand River watershed to prevent flooding, other than the river freezing up, the ice jams. So and the Grand River Conservation Authority has put a plan together to resolve that. So collectively, the municipalities along the Grand River working together is the reason that we've been able to protect the watershed and the communities have all been able to grow. So I think this legislation is kind of the concern for me is that it was snuck into another bill, an omnibus bill. Maybe people wouldn't notice it. November 5th, less than a month ago, we had to comment. So how do you comment within a month and have the information? It's just concerning how it got in the bill and why we haven't been consulted previously, even as a municipal council, about the changes going on. So this is asking for the province to consider some options. I welcome any amendments my councillor colleagues would like to add to it. There's more things that we should be concerned about, but we put in the things that are going to cost this municipality more money and delay development. Thank you.
Right. Not seeing any other hands, raised hands. Yeah, so I'll comment on it. Councillor Martin, go ahead. Then Councillor McCreary.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a little problem with this. I remember back when there was a building being built on the corner of Gretzky Parkway and Henry Street, and GRCA insisted that an intermittent stream be protected. What they called an intermittent stream was a drainage ditch. So I think GRCA sometimes overreaches on and are somewhat overzealous in some of their activities. And I don't think the province is going to give this much consideration in any case. So I think this is somewhat of a waste of time, and I don't think I'll be voting for it. Thank you.
All right, Councillor McCreary.
Mayor, thank you very much. I can appreciate why this is here before today, because Councillor Carpenter is involved with GRCA and he does respect them, and I believe they respect him, and that's why it's before us today, if my guess is correct. I would suspect they had a hand in the crafting of the resolution as well. I can appreciate that the comments that Councillor Carpenter has said are all, they're all pretty much bang on. When I looked at the resolution, I looked at my responsibility as a municipal councillor, and what I see in here is a statement that this may cost the municipality some additional funds. I'm not sure that it's bad for development. I'm not sure it's bad for the community, what the province is up to. But my recollection is this, that I believe that we contribute over $1 million a year to GRCA. And I've got to think that if GRCA loses its mandate to perform a lot of these duties, we and the other corporations up and down the watershed are going to be paying a heck of a lot less to support them. So I'm not sure that the financial calamity that's spoken to is exactly accurate. And again, as Councillor Martin said, I've got a bit of an issue with this as well. And although I appreciate the intent and I do support the GRCA, I'm not going to support the resolution before us today.
Next, Councillor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to staff, what is the connective tissue between Brantford City Council, GRCA, and Band Council, Six Nations Reserve Band Council, the Haudenosaunee? Is there a reporting structure that we have been observing up until this point that somehow involves either the city or the city's involvement or a city councilor involvement when it comes to issues around the Grand River?
I'm not sure we've got anybody here that can answer that. It's really a question that goes to the GRCA. I don't know. Are there any?
Okay, well, sorry, let me put a finer point on it. Should we be not including anyone from Six Nations whatsoever in this resolution? Because based on our experience, there is a spoken claim to the lands within 6 miles of the Grand River. And here we're talking about removing powers or gaining powers or removing money or removing representation. Should we not include anyone from First Nations peoples in this resolution, or is that already done? I don't know. Sorry, maybe I'm asking a question and maybe I'm proposing an amendment.
Is there a staff person can answer that?
It's Brian Hutchings, Mr. Mayor, CEO. I'm not sure if I can answer the councilor's question. I just can speak to the GRC Act, which is the Conservation Act, which, you know, basically provides a governance structure, who's appointed and who's not. Like, I don't have the act in front of me to speak to specific issues around Six Nations and Indigenous rights on the act and to the river and things like that. So I can only speak to your first part of your question, Councillor, that the points, as Councillor Carpenter's highlighted, that who goes on the board and the governance structure and what their mandate is. Like, I can't speak to the matters regarding Indigenous unless Joe or Selby know more, which I don't think they do.
Thank you for the opportunity to ask that question, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Next, Councillor Antosky.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm fully in support of this. I think it's a check and balance for the environment. There's expertise there, and I'd ask maybe staff can double check this, but in terms of the makeup, it wouldn't be just the Vic Pendergrasses. If I remember correctly, I think it limited it to just councillors. Like, I think even a mayor would be excluded from being able to be a member. So, which I don't know, seemed odd for me. I think that certainly at FCM in our Ontario caucus, we had a number of the municipalities talking about this and certainly quite alarmed that this had come forward again in a bill, that another omnibus bill that, you know, is titled something in regard to our recovery, our COVID recovery. So I think that the GRCA does good work. I know that we've had some concern over the time, the money that we give them, but I think that they do good work. I like the expertise. And again, it's about that check and balance for our environment. We have one of our biggest assets is a river, and it needs the attention that it gets. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Celeste.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There was nothing in the resolution referring to the river being our sole source of clean water. Is there anything in the changes being proposed that would impact that?
Selby will answer that.
Good evening, Chair. So there is an indirect impact from the regulations that are proposed on our drinking water. It doesn't say specifically about drinking water in there, about our source water protection. Again, we need to know once the regulation comes out, more details on how this would impact. But for now, if the wetlands or the water courses are not protected, then you'll have indirectly impact our drinking water source, which is the Grand River.
Okay, thanks, Selby. Yeah, I too can support this. I think it's important. I was looking at it mainly through our drinking water. And if there's something that's going to be done that could put that into jeopardy, that would be a huge problem for the city. While I agree with all the planning issues and the flood mitigation and all of those things, those are events, but the drinking water is a constant, and every day we depend on that. So to me, this is very important that we get at least our opinion in there, and whether it's listened to or not, I guess, is another thing, but it should be presented in any case. So I'll be supporting this, Mr. Mayor.
All right. So I get to speak now. Yeah, I'll certainly be supporting it. And I got to tell you, on Friday, I went to I didn't get to the GRCA board meeting, but I went to one earlier in the week. AMO board and LUMCOR, what is now called the Ontario Big City Merit. So I heard I got lots of input on this particular matter, and a little bit of a different perspective. And that is, I did hear from some mayors and some municipalities, usually smaller ones, where they were very concerned about the conservation authorities, and either the conservation authority not being as well managed as it should or overstepping. And I think that, it isn't well explained in the schedule of the bill exactly what's being, the intent is, but I think that was the intent to try and deal with that. But the problem is it's a one-size-fits-all solution because certainly from myself and other mayors where we have larger, more sophisticated, well-governed, well-managed conservation authorities, we're sort of looking at one another wondering, like, why? We have a terrific partnership with the GRCA here in the city of Brantford. They provide us a lot of value, not only in terms of planning applications, but also, their focus on helping us prevent ice jam floods, from the work they've done down in Gilkinson Flats to removing trees and barriers that hold up ice, to now having commissioned a consultant's report on what can be done to reduce and mitigate the risk of ice jam floods. But also, there are provisions that Councillor Carpenter didn't mention. And I saw this myself personally many years ago when I did some prosecutions for the GRCA, and that is the ability to enter property, their inspectors, and see somebody dumping something down a ravine and issuing stop work orders. And that's pretty critical because you can't see a lot of those activities from the road. My experience with the GRCA in terms of the planning issues here in town, and there's always issues here and there, but generally, the level of input we get on planning matters here has become so sophisticated with our special policy areas, knowing, the intimate knowledge of our water courses and how they're impacted, and a real desire on the part of our neighborhood not only protect ourselves from ice jams, but also how much we all see the river as a real valuable recreational asset, not to mention a source of drinking water. The GRCA has played such a major role in improving our river and protecting us from the river, but also multiplying the benefits of having a river running through us. So I can certainly support this. I mean, there are provisions in the schedule that I guess make sense if they're trying to standardize the metrics for conservation authorities, but unfortunately there were other items added in that I just could not accept. So I can certainly support this, and did pretty consistently last week. I was interested in a lot of different versions of resolutions, I guess, depending on what your perspective was or is. So, Councillor Carpenter.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. Like the whole concept of conservation authorities is to protect the watershed for everyone. The watershed doesn't change at the boundary of the city of Brantford or the county of Brant. The watershed, protecting the watershed all up and down the Grand River. That planning, watershed planning, is the whole concept of allowing growth along the river. This this act as enacted, this will set watershed management back decades. We are protected by the dams up further up the river, the Shan Dam and the reservoirs are what protect us so that we have drinking water. In fact, in the summer when we have droughts, they're able to release water to keep water flowing down the river. That whole organization are protecting the watershed and disallowing development where development shouldn't occur in order to protect the watershed is all good planning. And this is taking that away. In fact, it's giving superpowers to the minister to enact whatever powers he or she wishes in the future. So you have to ask yourself a question here. At least I ask myself this question: why would the government hide this in this important bill, the omnibus bill? Why would they bury it in this bill and then give us less than 30 days to comment on it? Why would they have done that? If they really wanted to change conservation authorities, why wasn't there meaningful consultation with the public and everybody involved? Because they have no interest in doing that. That's why they're rushing this through. This will be passed next week. And I agree with a couple of my councillor colleagues to say probably nothing will happen. I agree nothing will happen because I don't think this government's listening. And I think this government doesn't care about the environment. I think this government cares about development and development only. That's how I feel about it when I see this act. This is going to destroy conservation authorities with a sledgehammer when what they really needed to do was, to do some tweaking and things to conservation authorities, to regulations, to make things the way they wanted it. So I don't know how anybody couldn't vote for this, but if you care about the environment, you got to vote for this. I mean, the province has got to listen to us. I think there's a question asked about the Indigenous rights, and there is a comment from the Law Society for the Environment that talks about that there is no place in the new legislation to allow Indigenous individuals on the board of the GRCA, and there should be. It runs through 6 nations, the largest reserve in the country, in this province, and there isn't anything there to give rights for commenting on protecting the watershed to the Indigenous population. That's not in the bill either. So there's things that aren't in the bill that should be in the bill, and there's things that are in this bill that are taken away, and they're designed to destroy conservation authorities, is the way I see it. So I hope that everybody could support this, regardless of what the government stripe is.
Councillor Curry.
Mayor, thank you. You must have been periodically elsewhere when you heard a member of council accuse members who've indicated they're not going to be voting for this, that they have no care for the environment.
Yeah.
I'd appreciate it if you had caught that, Mayor, because that's it's inflammatory, and that kind of language has no place in this debate.
Yes, I believe you're correct, Councillor Carver. I think you went a little bit far with the language. I appreciate your passion for it, but maybe a bit excessive, I believe.
And I think much of this has been overstated. This limits the activities of the GRCA in particular and other conservation authorities in general. It does not have any impact whatsoever on the drinking water, and that's just a complete fallacy. Our drinking water is monitored by the city of Brantford and our engineering folks, and to say that puts our water source at risk, it's just over the top, Mayor. Thank you.
All right. So Madam Clerk, let's call the vote. No one else wants to speak to it. So.
Councillor Slassen, Councillor Carpenter, we're just waiting for your responses. It is an e-scribe, so it would be on your tablet.
I'm not able to get in, but I'm voting in the affirmative.
Certainly, I'll mark that for you in the affirmative.
The same for me. Mine's not coming up either.
Certainly, Councillor Carpenter, I'll mark you in the affirmative. Item 4.1 has carried on a recorded vote of 7-2. Those voting in favor, Councillors Vanderstelt, Sless, Antosky, Wall, Weaver, Carpenter, Mayor Davis. Those opposed, Councillor Martin, Councillor McCreary.
So there's no notices of motion on this afternoon's agenda. So move right into bylaws. So Councillor Weaver, can you please move first and second reading of the bylaw?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. First and second reading of bylaw 208-2020 is moved by myself, and I am seeking a seconder. Councillor Antosky with the quick wrist. So she's my seconder.
All right. Any discussion on the bylaw? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please take the vote.
I'll be voting in the affirmative, Mr. Mayor.
I've marked that for you, Councillor Sless.
Thank you.
The first and second reading of the bylaws is carried on a vote of 9-0. Those voting in favor, Councillors Vanderstelt, Sless, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Weaver, Mercuri, Carpenter, Mayor Davis.
All right, let's move on to third reading of Councillor Sless. I believe you've got the resolution for third reading.
I do, Mr. Mayor. It's moved by myself seeking a seconder that
So
bylaw
Councillor Weaver
208-2020.
is seconded. Sorry, Councillor Weaver seconded. So
Okay, yep. That bylaw 208-2020 be taken, be read a third time and finally signed by the mayor and clerk.
all right, any discussion on third reading? Councillor Carpenter?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. I think one of the members of council suggested that maybe the Grand River Conservation Authority had a help in writing this resolution. They did not. It was our city staff that helped write this resolution, and I ran it through the planning department, and that's where the main focus of the planning costs came from. So it was our staff along with myself. They did the writing. I just did the approving, but that's where it came from. Thank you.
Councillor McCurry?
I'd like to thank Councillor Carpenter for that clarity.
All right. Seeing no other discussion, I'll call the Madam Clerk. Take the vote, please. Third reading.
I'm in the affirmative, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Councillor Sless. Councillor Wall, just waiting for your vote. The third reading of the bylaw has carried on a recorded vote of 9-0. Those voting in favor, Councillors Vanderstelt, Sless, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Weaver, Mercuri, Carpenter, Mayor Davis.
All right, that completes our business this afternoon. We'll be reconvening committee of the whole. I'll be in the chair tonight, 6 p.m.